no, in all seriousness, I know we're the final session holding you back from cocktails and networking, but I promise that we saved one of the best for last. And I just want to say a quick thank you to Advyzon and the team for putting on just an incredible inaugural event. I know and Joel knows what it takes to put on events, so incredible first go of it, and just kudos to the team there. And, just thank you for bringing together such a diverse group of speakers at this event to hear about all the topics that should be top of mind for us in this industry. And I'm joined by two of the greats, and if you don't know them, they don't need much introduction, but we have the godfather of fintech, Joel Bruckenstein, and a newly dubbed title I have given Bob Veres of the Hemingway of financial journalism, because if you haven't checked out his, there we go, if you haven't checked out his newsletters, you absolutely should. His writing is just so eloquent, succinct, and brings a lot of great perspective. So
this is so embarrassing.
Hey, you promised you wouldn't sit up here and drool, so thank you for participating in the first place. So, but I do want to set the stage for this conversation. And if you're not familiar with the T3 study, you absolutely should be, because it is an incredible benchmark around how consumers and technology decision makers are utilizing tech, what they love about it. And another shout out to Advyzon. I mean, they absolutely crushed it this year in the survey with an 8+ rating. Correct me if I'm wrong, but really across every category that they were in. Very, very impressive. And honestly, it's thanks to a lot of the users in this room.
Absolutely.
So again, just want to set the stage with that and just talk a little bit about that before we dive into the other fun part of our conversation. But Joel, what stood out to you this year in the survey in particular?
Well, one thing that stood out is the jump in participation in the estate planning category. And a lot of that was actually due to the fact that we included eMoney's estate module, which we hadn't done in the past. But nevertheless, if we look back to sort of 5 years ago, we didn't even have a category because there wasn't a lot of third-party technology in the estate space. And I guess the technologists were looking a little more forward than the advisors were and saying sunset provisions going to kick in 2026. Not a lot of time to start planning because pretty much everybody's going to need a new estate plan. And so now there's a lot of great tools that are on the market, and hopefully advisors are going to start using them.
And Bob, what were your takeaways this year from the T3 study?
I think the thing that I was most surprised about was the custodial rankings and user ratings, because Schwab had just come off of what might be described as a rocky experience with integrating TD Ameritrade advisors onto their platform, and I was expecting them to the user rating to drop below 7, but I think they were at 7.27 or something, which is respectable.
It's very respectable.
So yes, there wasn't really a penalty for that. The other thing that I always look at and that I really enjoy is the companies that emerge from nowhere. Holistaplan, FP Alpha, Advyzon is a great example of it. And is it okay if I offer that apology that I was talking about before? Because
no better time than the present. So.
Well, I owe Advyzon an apology because I had seen Highland a few times at different conferences, and I asked him just briefly, what is it you do, and he said we're an all-in-one solution, and all-in-one solutions do not have a good reputation historically. We take a crappy CRM solution and we pair that with a below-average asset management solution, and the document management solution is not very good either, but they're all integrated, just like everybody else is integrated. And so fighting against the best of breed seemed like kind of a quixotic element. So I finally got a little more interested in them. I walked up to the booth at TD Ameritrade Conference. They were in the new technology booth. And Highland had seen me a few times, and so he wanted to tell John that this is not an advisor, it's going to be a different conversation. So he whispered, "He's like Joel Bruckenstein." And I thought, what a mean thing to say.
Really?
I hardly even know him, and already he's grievously insulting him. How would you like it if someone, well, anyway,
let's not go there.
Yeah, that's right. But the apology really is that I was, prejudice is not a good thing in any sense of the word. And I was prejudiced just simply because of what he was trying to do. And it wasn't until Advyzon got higher ratings than the best of breed in a bunch of categories that I took them seriously and wrote about them. And I actually called them after the survey, was it last year or the year before? But nobody had seen the survey results, but I had, and I was saying, you know, it's about time I talked to you guys and mentioned you to my readers. So I apologize. I should have been on board with that earlier than I was.
Well, I think there were a few unique things about Advyzon that weren't true about the other all-in-ones we were looking at. Most of the other all-in-ones were done through mergers and acquisitions, right? It started off as something, they got something else that was built on a different set of technology that didn't talk to each other, and then they bought something else that didn't talk to them. And some of these companies are still trying to get everything on one united platform, right? Where it's really fully integrated.
Yeah.
And Advyzon, the difference is it was built from the ground up to be an all-in-one. And I think that's maybe what I saw a little earlier than you did.
You know, that's normal for you and me. I've noticed that a few times.
All right, well, thank you for coming to our therapy session and our now on the record apology. Well, thank you both for that. But now we're going to dive in, like I said, to the other fun part of our conversation. And I caveat this by saying, when I got on the prep call with these two and to say, hey, this is going to be our topic, let's put some guardrails around this, they both immediately said almost in unison, you can ask us anything, go anywhere with this. And I said, well...
He actually said that, not me. I just want everybody to know that.
Oh, okay.
You were okay with it.
I'm okay with it.
So I said, okay, then we will absolutely run with it. And so we're going to make this part a little bit exciting, a little bit debate style, and I promise I'm going to get through as many trends as possible that we're going to talk about and have you both debate them. So we'll see how many we can get through. I have at least 10 that I know everyone will be interested in this room, and I want to start with what's on the tip of everyone's tongue, AI. We're more than likely going to see firms pouring millions into Gen AI initiatives, in particular over the next few years. So do we need to strap in for an AI digital transformation in wealth management? And what are the use cases? We're kind of just scratching the surface here. Joel, I'd love to start with you.
So I would have given a different answer an hour ago, but after looking at what Hylin and team have just built, I think it's really cutting edge. So, you know, up until right now, we really didn't see firms in our industry coming out with usable products that are released and we can put in advisors' hands today to do some of the things that Advyzon can now do. So I think that's going to put pressure on the rest of the industry. I think, you know, we live in a highly regulated environment. SEC has been pretty clear they don't want us giving advice based on AI, so you're not going to see financial planning advice or portfolio construction advice on AI just yet. But I think there's a lot of other things that advisors are already doing with AI. So you think about, you know, most of the people in this room have a blog. Most of them are writing newsletters to their clients. First drafts of newsletters or outlines and those sort of things, you know, to me are table stakes. There was a great presentation at Bob's conference, which I also had at mine, where there was a lady who was in charge of operations of a relatively large RIA firm, and she had like 20 use cases of things they were actually implementing in their office today with AI. Some of them I just mentioned, but also gifting, brainstorming, using it in HR to create questions for new potential employees that they were going to employ. There's a lot of things you can do with AI today that are totally compliant. Having said that, if you're going to use AI for any of the things I just mentioned, it's important to have a policy, right? If you're going to let your employees loose on ChatGPT or Gemini, which used to be called Bard, which is essentially the Google version of ChatGPT, you have to have policies and procedures in place and say what they can do and what they can't do. The other thing you should also be aware of is something called Zero GPT. Zero GPT is a tool that you can run any, let's call it, paper through, and it'll tell you how high or low the likelihood is, or what percentage of the paper that was written is written by AI. So you don't want people looking at things that you've put out and saying, it's obvious this is 100% generated by AI. So that's why I say first draft, and then put your own personality and your own intellectual property into whatever you do.
I actually had that program look at one of my articles, and it said that it was 1.47% generated by AI. And the actual right number was 0, but I thought it was interesting that it detected something about AI. I had a lot of conversations at T3 about this subject. I'd walk up and I'd say, what are you guys doing with AI? And my general impression is that artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It's not going to be making decisions. It's not going to be thinking independently. It's not going to be, but it does seem to me to impact the fintech world very profoundly in 2 ways. The first is, and Joel has talked to me about this a lot, is that the complaint that you often hear from the fintech people, especially if you get a few drinks in them, which could happen in an hour from now, the first complaint they have is that most of our users are only using 40 to 60% of the features in our software.
60 is high.
60 is high, and they're complaining about it and thinking about going on to something else when they're not really using what we're offering. And AI, the first user case, everybody is talking about AI as a retrieval mechanism, as a user, a UX experience. And you heard that here very clearly from the executive team here. So what's going to happen, I think, is that AI is going to make all of those obscure features visible and usable and easily usable. And so people are going to be using 100% of their software instead of 40%. I don't know what the number is, but and that's going to, and the second thing is, the software companies are no longer going to be afraid to add new features that nobody's going to use because it complicates the UX experience. Now that everything is available through a very easy user interface, they're going to be creating, I think there's going to be an explosion of new feature sets within these softwares, and AI enhances the efficiency of programming. So they're going to be able to create them more quickly. And that's going to have a profound impact, even if AI is not doing any real actual thinking.
Well, AI actually is being used by a lot of developers today to write code and speed up the creation of code. So I think the other impact that we're going to feel immediately is providers like Advyzon are going to be able to create new and better features more quickly.
Absolutely. So in a similar vein, we also need to talk about data, because the success of new technology tools, especially AI, relies on the integrity of the data at the end of the day. And advisors obviously want to be able to build that trust with their clients, but if you don't have a central repository with good data, because it's at the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out, if you don't have a robust data strategy, and I look at AI as something as, say, for example, what if a machine learning model, turns you down for a loan and you don't know why? Wouldn't you want to understand at the end of the day, so you could prepare yourself to be more viable for that loan? And so there's a lot of trust that needs to still be built there. So what are the implications of getting that wrong or right?
First of all, bad example, because if a bank turned me down today, they wouldn't tell me why. So it's not going to really be different with AI.
You're not supposed to say that the moderator is saying.
Well, every now and then I got to poke.
It's okay.
I got to poke a little fun at her.
It builds character.
Come on.
All right.
Got to get.
I was going to be the butt of your jokes. Okay.
I got to get my shots in where I can. So anyway, I think going to the integrity of data is very important. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff on the internet. It may be news to some of you in the audience. Not everything on the internet is actually true. So if you go out to ChatGPT and ask it stuff, and it's looking at everything on the internet, you may have some problems. I think what's eventually going to happen, and it's already starting to happen quite rapidly, is firms are going to create their own data sets, and they're going to layer AI on top of that. Microsoft and others are already creating, applications that allow you to do just that. So you can take Copilot, which is basically ChatGPT, and just for a fee, use it on your data set. So financial industry is a great example. We have a ton of data. So the more data we have, the more data we can mine. The problem is, and I know this only applies to probably one of you in the audience, not every one of you has absolutely pristine data.
No.
Sometimes if we go and look at, your CRM data, or if you have portfolio management data going back 20 years, it can be a little wobbly, as we say in the industry. And so in order to really be able to use the data, the first thing you have to do is make sure your data is clean. And once you've done an audit and know your data is really clean, which you should do anyway, by the way, then you can start putting, layering machine learning and AI on top of it and get the value for the 10x or the 100x ROI that they were talking about on the stage earlier.
Fair enough. I don't think your analogy was wrong, because I think AI is, see, so ask me better questions next time. So I think AI is really a leveraging tool. If you have biases, AI is going to leverage those biases.
Yes.
If you have bad assumptions, AI is going to leverage those bad assumptions to make even worse decisions. And so AI is just, you got to be really careful with it, just simply because whatever you're doing with it, you've got to have it translate accurately what you want it to make happen. But I do think, if we get increasingly efficient AI interfaces to software, that's going to make software more opaque. Well, software is already moving toward being a black box as it is. There's more and more stuff going on under the hood that I think most advisors don't really know about. And AI is just going to complete the process. The black box is going to be completely black at that point. And you're just going to ask it, tell me something, and you won't know whether or not what's under there. And so two things. The developers are going to have to be really careful about how they do those calculations internally. And the advisors are going to have to put a little more time into understanding how those black boxes work.
See, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. I think the threat is there, and I think you're right that that's a legitimate threat. But, the SEC has already been pretty clear on how this industry has to operate. So even today, if we're using an optimizer, if you're using sort of SuperSolve with MoneyGuide, which many of you are probably using, there has to be documentation somewhere, which most of you have probably never read, but I have, that tells you how it actually works, right? And what the SEC is saying now is you actually have to read that documentation and understand how an optimizer works if you're going to use it with your clients. And so I think to some extent, the same kind of thing is going to happen with AI. It will be a little more opaque because we're not all data scientists, but somewhere there'll have to be an explanation of actually how it's working. If you're using it in a generative fashion, how was it programmed? And over time, I think we'll find out really quickly who's good at doing that and who's not.
And you'll probably violently disagree with me on this, but I really think the CFP board should be awarding CE credits for knowing and understanding how the technology works and how to apply it.
He's being facetious. I've been fighting with the CFP board for 20 years about that, and they still don't give enough credit for technology.
I think you're losing that battle.
Well, they're giving a little bit now, but it's still incremental at best.
So in the same vein of data, though, I mean, there is hope when it comes to centralizing, with the advent of data lakes and data warehouses, with storage becoming cheaper. And Bob, you actually said it best, like as this trend emerges, it's going to eliminate kind of that annoying integration issue between best of breed if we can get it right.
I think that's right. Did you want to take that, or you want me to?
Sure. Go ahead if you have something to say. If not, I do.
The data warehouse, we put a new category in for data warehouses in the software survey. And, I'm suspecting that the idea of a centralized data warehouse, which would be very helpful, I think, to the profession, is going to get legs because the companies, you might have heard of some of the companies that are behind it, Pershing, Orion, and InvestNet. And so, those companies are going to make that happen and make it available through their platforms. And the concept, I think, will be accelerated. And once we have that access to a consolidated, it's something we've needed for a long time. And we don't need to have the data siloed the same way the solutions are siloed. Advyzon is one of the solutions to that, but in general, there needs to be a more generalized solution.
Yeah, that's my feeling. I think you're going to have two choices in the future. One is you're going to come to a company like Advyzon, and they're going to do it for you, which essentially they are doing right now, if you just heard what they said on stage. But the other solution, and I think the way very large RIAs are going already today, is they're saying, we want to own our own data, we want to control our own data, and we want to have it under our roof, because we don't want to be beholden to one provider, or in their cases, probably 3 or more. And so, what you can do is you can put everything in a database or a data lake, and you normalize the data, and then you have all the applications pulling the data as they need it from your set of data. The advantage of that is you can do some creative things with it, and you can create intellectual property on your own that you might not be able to create if you're going through a third-party provider. And it's not that expensive anymore. It's really getting cheaper all the time. So the entry point is probably for firms in the $2.5 to $3 billion range today, but I think it'll eventually come down and it'd be affordable for pretty much everybody.
Absolutely. And obviously when it comes to data, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about cybersecurity. So I know, Joel, this is a drum you beat constantly every year, especially in the survey. Adoption rates still remain pretty low. They are starting to creep up, but I mean, every advisor and every firm should be prioritizing their cyber vendors at the end of the day, because it's
Right.
coming whether you want it or not.
Well, so it's 2 things. Coming back to the last topic about owning your own data, the most challenging thing for everybody in this room about owning your own data is going to be protecting it, because all the PII is going to be there, all the financial data is going to be there, and it's going to be attractive to bad actors. And so most of you, your cyber hygiene is not that good, and you really shouldn't even contemplate what I just said before if you're not going to get serious about cybersecurity. Our survey showed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, going back 4 or 5 years, I think the adoption rate for having a third-party cyber expert, even one time, was about 18%.
Yeah.
Now it's like 25.5%, something like that.
Exactly right.
So essentially, 75% of all the advisors we surveyed said they've never actually engaged, even once, with a third-party cyber expert. And since probably none of you are cyber experts, I think that's a problem. A lot of you mistakenly think if you have somebody who's performing an IT function that they're a cyber expert. They are not. I can say that categorically, because being a cyber expert is a full-time job. So the attacks are only going up. AI is also already being used by the bad guys with more sophisticated attacks, and it's only a matter of time that you're going to have a cyber incident if you're not prepared. So if there's one thing that I would urge you to take away from this, it's go find a cyber expert and get some advice and lock things down, because if not, you're going to regret it one day, and it's the one thing that can probably put you out of business.
Joel and I have different takes on this. Joel is concerned about your well-being and wants you to be protected from North Korean hackers and Russian hacker farms, if you will. And I'm kind of looking forward to that horrible, terrible cyber incident so I can write about it, because it's going to be a really juicy story. And what more could I ask for? But if that happens, that's going to wake everybody up. It's a little depressing. The numbers that we get are a little depressing. I should point out that the cyber, we measure how many people are coming to the cyber experts that we list.
Right.
And we don't know all the cyber experts there are in the world.
But there is a fill in the blank, and they could put other.
That's true.
And they don't.
That's true.
You forgot
Good
about
point.
that, right?
I did, actually. But there is some hope. Thank you for pointing that out about you've got some new firms moving into this space, and I think that's where the hope lies.
Yeah.
You know, FCI created Buckler, which organizes all the regulatory stuff for vendor management, and Al's technology was new in the T3 exhibit hall, and they're terrific. They're amazing. So what I worry about is more that when I talk to advisors about cybersecurity, they're talking about compliance.
Yeah.
They're worried about the SEC auditor coming in, not the hacker farms in Russia. And I'm just feeling like the hacker farms in Russia might be a more pertinent threat to the data security and to your clients.
Well,
so protecting your clients should be the goal.
I think what Bob is trying to point out is, there's 2 main sides to cybersecurity, right? One is the human side, which entails the compliance side, and the other side is the technical controls, right? And if you don't have both down pat, there's gaps, and people are going to exploit those gaps. It's only a matter of time.
Absolutely. And so if that's not a case to quickly adopt cyber vendors into your practice, then I don't know what else we can say at that point.
Oh, and I don't want to be, the downer before the cocktail hour, but
we'll pick it back
is what
up.
it is.
I'm good with that downer thing. I'm happy with it.
Okay.
I'll play that role.
All right. Well, speaking of adoption, though, really likely due to the integration challenges that the industry still faces, there's still friction at the end of the day when it comes down to it. Advisors have also just been slow to adopt the more promising tech players that are coming on the market. And cutting edge means nothing at the end of the day without adoption around it. So, as an industry, how can we encourage that adoption? What can be done, especially, like I said, as more entrants come in? I mean, that map just keeps getting bigger. Not a whole lot of consolidation right now happening.
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I could make a general observation that I think is important for everybody here to recognize. The fintech marketplace right now is composed of the leading market share people that show up in our survey are fairly well established, and their solutions have been, you could almost call them legacy solutions now. They've been around for a while. They haven't changed dramatically. They've added features, but now they're kind of set in stone, if you will, at a time when there's a tremendous amount of innovation going on in the business. And I can't think of a better recipe for disruption than those two colliding with each other. And so what we have right now is the market share leaders are faced with a decision. And it's not a happy decision. Do I rewrite from the ground up and reinvent myself and spend a lot of money on meeting the competition that's emerging? Or do I just wait for inertia to keep people in place long enough that I can keep milking this annuity that I've got and hope that advisors don't really make a change? One of the lovely things about this conference is that there's a high percentage of people who do make changes when they see something new and better. And that's not the norm. You people in this audience are not normal, and I like that about you. And not being normal in a highly disruptive environment is going to be a great survival and thrival, if that's a word. It's not a word.
It is now.
Thrival feature.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I do think it's a little bit more complex than that. I think when TD went away, TD was an incubator for a lot of these new companies. If a new company was looking to get a custodial relationship, they were an open door for everybody. There was a little bit of concern when they went away that there wasn't going to be that open door. Luckily, I think there's been the emergence of some new custodians with newer technology who are somewhat welcoming to these newer entrants. So it's really sort of a race against time. When you have one of these new companies, they have, I would say, 36 months to kind of reach critical mass and get enough customers that they're self-sustaining and that people take them seriously. If not, they tend to fall by the wayside. So I do think there's great emerging technology out there. The other thing that's a little different, particularly the last 2 years at T3 in the emerging tech section, is the tech companies we see now are not a couple of 20-somethings coming out of a garage. They're usually successful entrepreneurs that have done something before. They're much better financed. They're a little more familiar with the industry, and so the learning curve is not as steep for them. And there's a couple of them in the exhibit hall here. Companies like Nebo, nobody heard of them a couple of years ago, right? And I'm sure there's a couple of others, I just can't think of them all off the top of my head. But there are companies out there that are doing really good work that I think are worthy of your attention. And I think it is more robust than we've seen, even though there has been quite a bit of M&A in the industry. So for every one that gets merged, it seems like two new ones pop up.
And I want to go back to a point you made around the custodial landscape. And again, Bob, I am stealing your term of portable custodial relationships. You predicted that this year in particular, we'll see a lot of movement with advisors looking for really the next best thing when it comes to custodial services. So, what does this shift mean ultimately for the industry? That's not in your outline. This is a curveball. So, sorry.
Well, if you look at our survey, you notice that the leading market share custodians are not the highest rated user rating custodians.
Correct.
Trade PMR almost broke the 9 barrier, which is remarkable.
Unheard of.
You have to have weird users in order to get that high. Because there are some people that won't give anybody, if God were to come down here and create an app, it would get a 7 from them, and they really like this, so I'll give it a 5. So getting a average 9-point rating is truly remarkable. But at the same point, Altruist got, I think, an 8.5 or something, and who else was, somebody else got a high 8 point something. I forgot who it was now. But the point is that there are custodial alternatives. That's one trend. The other trend is that it's getting a lot easier to move clients from one custodian to another. It used to be you had to sit down with a client and go through a painful process with a manual piece of paper that filling in blanks and it took a long time for you. It disrupted the client relationship. It was annoying. Now you just fill out a form and it automatically populates the forms. The client can sign off, with a digital signature, and so things are a lot more fluid now. And I think it's going to do two things. One, it's going to boost the competitiveness, and the second is it's going to force the larger custodians to respond to that competition. And the fluidity is just going to work for your benefit.
Well, I think the one thing we've seen across the whole survey is some of these smaller firms, or not the leaders in the market share, when they get these ratings of 8.5 and 9, people do start taking notice, and it does create, some momentum for these firms. So, you read what we read, and if you're at a custodian that's got a 5, and somebody's given another custodian a 9, that's something that I would pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know we only have about 3.5 minutes left, so going to do a hard pivot, strap on your political pundit hats here for a second, because we have to talk about it. We're in an election year, which always has a direct impact on the economy, but it does create opportunities for advisors to have deeper, more meaningful conversations around that, because there are tax implications, there's going to be volatilities and things like that. And so their clients' finances are going to be top of mind this year. Thoughts as we kind of head into another tumultuous election year?
Well, income tax rates are going to change. State tax, the whole estate law is going to change. And so you need to be prepared for it. And again, this is where vendor satisfaction really pays off, because some firms are really quick at updating all the tax tables and making the adjustments they need so you can work with your clients and have those conversations, and some are not. But what I can tell you for sure is, like I said about estate before, pretty much all your clients are going to need a new estate plan in the next year and a half or so.
Anyway.
Yeah, no matter what. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we know it's not going to be what it is today. So if you're not already thinking about this and writing down in your CRM, who are the people that have the most complex situations that I need to get in front of right away as soon as we have this knowledge, you're not going to be prepared. If you don't have the workflows in place to service a lot of clients very quickly and go through this process, you're going to have issues. And income taxes also, it's going to change. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's not going to be what it is today.
I have a cartoon in one of my newsletters that has a newscaster looking into the camera and saying, yesterday, Congress simplified the tax code by adding 2,495 pages to it.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
And what I think Congress has been a really good, reliable driver of business to the financial planning profession.
True.
They force clients to come to you to say, what the hell do I do now? What is this? I don't know what this all means. And, and then you get new clients and you reassure your existing clients, and sometimes you can charge extra fees for it. And, so go Congress, but I have to say, we have created the most god-awful complicated investment and financial system that could possibly have existed. Yep. Why did we do that to ourselves? And I don't really have a good answer for that, but I know that the main beneficiaries are the people in this room who know how to navigate it.
Absolutely.
It really, in an ideal society, people shouldn't have to pay you to figure out these complicated things, but we don't live in that world. That's an alternate universe that, you know, I hope someday, if I die, I'm reincarnated into that universe and not this one.
Well, keep us posted on how that goes, but.
That's a good line for a tweet. Somebody should tweet that one out.
Say, hopefully somebody captured that. With just a couple, like a minute or so left, I did want to open it up if there are any questions, but obviously catch Joel and Bob after this panel. We had several more trends to get through, but I know, again, we are headed into the cocktail era. But if we do have a question or two out there, would love to take that. And if I don't see hands, I'm going to call on people.
I think a sample question is, Bob, why are you so wonderful? You know, a question like that might be appropriate.
If not, they can all get us in the bar next door. That's where I'll be.
Exactly. So with that, I just want to say thank you to both of you. I know we could have dove into a lot more. Please join us next door at 5:30. The cocktail hour will kick off, and be sure to grab these two gentlemen to pick their brains, as you have access to them right now. So
thank you, Shannon. Great job.
Thank you.